Well, after the last episode where we had a little explore of Santorini, we were heading off the island to see more of the Cyclades. As already covered, there's no shortage of people who want to dunk on either Santorini or Mykonos, for reference, the two islands in the Cyclades that have international airports, for being too overpriced, too crowded, and generally despoiled from their once peaceful state. And it's not impossible to see where this criticism comes from, but for this episode, we're exploring an island that is frequently offered up as an antidote to the more busy islands. I see Paros mooted as an example of a quiet but still medium-sized Cycladic island. However, this may already be changing. More on that later. For now, we'll start by how we got there from Santorini. So, there are buses that go from Fira that line up with the major boat times. However, this means they're at seemingly random times, and these get written up at the bus station in Sharpie, so you'll need to be keeping an eye. The port at Santorini is a bit of a scrum. It's not somewhere you'd want to spend too much time. Eventually, our Blue Line's ferry came into view. Getting on board was noisy and chaotic. When you suddenly get into the lounges, it is disarmingly quiet away from the revving engines and crew shouting. But to my astonishment, considering the movement of people and vehicles in only a 20-minute window, we actually left on time. Got some spectacular wide views of Santorini before it disappeared behind us. At length, got a glimpse of Ios, which as a bonus we'll be back to later. And we passed Naxos. I was keen to do that on this trip, but it quickly transpired that we simply wouldn't have the time to do it anywhere near properly. But, as is usually the way on this channel, since this trip we actually managed to make it to Naxos, and to spoil the episode entirely, it was absolutely glorious, so expect that in a couple of weeks' time. Anyway, for now, got a good look at the main port of Naxos, and even caught sight of the famous door that survives from the Temple of Apollo. With Naxos disappearing behind us, we got a first look at the northern tip of Paros and its scatter of little islets, and the town of Nausa, which was on our list. It had been quite relaxing being on board, but it was a 4-hour boat, so we were glad to be getting off and swinging into view. Yeah, let's have a quick supercut of the Paros coast. Well, the quiet beauty of the island is starkly contrasted with another mad racket to get off the boat. First impressions of Paros, well, that's a nice windmill. Already a lot calmer than Santorini, and we'd arrived at Gold now, so everything was bathed in a lush, warm glow. Drifted the short distance to our room, which was, really nice, nested in a pretty cluster of apartments. Then headed out, caught a gorgeous yet understated sunset by the water. Here, there's no fanfare like all of the sunset-facing and sunset-themed places on Santorini, just a group of strangers enjoying the moment by some rocks at the water's edge. Dropped into this interesting-looking bar for a drink, so that's a strong start. Gyros for dinner, you love to see it. So, cut to next morning, and up early. The streets really are a delight to walk down. It's amazing what some white paint can do. Massively fond of Paros Centre. It's a nice place to get lost. Now, speaking of paint, was a little comical to observe the pavements also getting the coat of paint. Again, this feels like a metaphor for something, but, well, the pieces are all there. You put it together. Credit where it's due too, everything is pretty clean. The streets are soaking wet first thing in the morning, not because it's rained, but there are guys out with fire hoses cleaning them down. Well, the parts that are not being painted at least. This is a bit of a slip hazard, by the way. I nearly went down several times. Now, despite Paros being west-facing, the sun peaked above the hills almost immediately to light up the town. There was a ferry noisily disgorging freight into the town, so the waterfront did not have quite that tranquil stillness, but was exactly as beautiful as it looks here. Wanted to check out the castle, to which a cursory glance would say, what castle? And it's a fair question. It's not exactly Mont Saint-Michel. Like we'd found in Santorini, castles in the Cyclades have not infrequently been subsumed into a cluster of residential buildings such that the original defences are almost invisible. The church, of course, is gorgeous, but if you walk past it, you're in for a surprise. There was some signage talking about an ancient temple, and, well, here's where it went. The Dukes of Naxos decided the town needed a castle more than it needed an ancient temple, so he bodged all of the temple marble into this new castle construction, which is a choice. I know what spolia is, but I've never seen it quite this stark before. Then ducking back through a web of streets with nothing but a wild guess where they'd end up, low-angle flag shot, and they ended up right by this nice-looking coffee spot that I'd had my eye on. And yes, this was really good. Got both a cappuccino and an espresso to take in the blend in its pure form. And yeah, not just great flavour, but just bliss to be sitting here on a sunny morning. Even the bank opposite had a gorgeous doorway. Now, chilly though it was first thing before the sun came up, April was feeling pretty good in Paros, and the best weather of the trip had landed in the 48 hours we were there. So far, I'm pretty sure it's apparent, being on Paros felt amazing. At breakfast here, it was a good espresso. I have a feeling they just made the prices up on the spot, as they weren't stated anywhere on the menu, and this came to €18, which is a bit steep. But, independent place, I didn't mind too much. So, yeah, just be prepared to get hit with tourist prices if you're not on your guard. But, I was having far too much of a nice morning to really care. Next, had to get a proper look in here. Because there's, let's say, not a huge diversity in church design in Greece. I can feel that feeling where I'm making an unsafe assertion that I might regret later. But yeah, actually not unlike English churches, the broad strokes of shape and form tend to follow certain types. It's on the details that they vary. Anyways, this means that this might not instantly stand out as unique, but it's actually one of the most significant Roman survivors in the Cyclades. Its proper name is the Panagaia Ekatontapelani, which means the Church of 100 Doors. And look, there are hotels that have fewer doors than that. Where are you hiding all of them? The earliest parts of the church are from the early 300s, before the site would have even been used as a church, and it saw significant building under Justinian in the early 500s. And despite earthquake damage in the 1700s, it is remarkably close to its original form. So once we've been around there, a quick detour to a mosaic just a little way to the north. The highlights are a bit blown out on camera, but it's a Greek island at 10 a.m. What you gonna do? Then the museum. Also well worth a visit, but not going to unpack everything there right now because we were getting a bus through the middle of Paros, which was looking very green. I don't know if it keeps this colour into August, but in April it was a lush green carpet. So, Nausa. This is in the north of the island in a sheltered bay. It's the main other town on the island outside of Perikia, but it's not where the ferry docks, so it filters down the numbers of visitors even further. However, it's a beautiful enough town in and of itself to pull in something of a crowd. Wandered into Nausa without much of a compass. This unfenced channel next to the road is making me uneasy, but reflexively headed to the waterfront, and not far away, this wouldn't happen to be a Venetian fortification, would it? Let's just get a better look at this place with a supercut. So after a bit of time in the town, we spent the afternoon taking stock photography along these little micro beaches that dot the coast between Nausa and the opposite side of the bay. The whitewash look of the Cyclades is as gorgeous as it looks, but to the camera, it's this blinding light source, my aperture. Anyway, at length, after a leisurely walk, we got to our target. This is the Mycenaean Acropolis of Koukouranis. Now, I don't want to spoil this entirely, as we are maybe 2/3 of our way around Mycenaean sites around Greece and beyond, which is going to make a great series one day. But I will say, there was something rather comical about this site. Bear in mind, it was signposted nearly 10 miles away, so there's a clear acknowledgement that there's something here. But on arrival, there's no footpath, no instructions, just a sign that points up, rather vaguely. So thankfully, you don't have to be a skilled free climber. You can just walk or scramble up. The exact story of the top I will leave for one day in the future when we discuss the Mycenaean sites, but the views from the top, those were sublime. I don't want to cram too many supercuts into this episode, but there's just too much gorgeous footage not to use this. So made it down, and there was a gorgeous little beach below where I took a paddle. Yeah, definitely earned that one in the heat. I didn't think of it so much at the time. It was hot, for sure, but had it been the height of summer, I would have suffered far more scrambling up this bare rock with no shade. Then walked back the not inconsiderable distance to Nausa, stopped off for a gelato and Freddo espresso. We'd walked maybe 2 hours, but this felt like a proper summer paradise. Despite the fact we were only there an afternoon, Nausa is a pretty special find. Because it's a couple of degrees removed from the normal tourist routes, it manages to still be special, but not that it's deserted. You remember all those empty tables from earlier? Well, look at them now. So, bus back, just be aware you will likely need coins for this machine, so keep some handy. Took a little afternoon walk in Paricchia, had a chance to try out a couple of local beers. I'd assumed this one had said Hellenic lager, not heretic. I didn't get a chance to quiz it on its theological positions, but it tasted good. Was hoping to go for a coffee island, but it was closed. Boo! So opted for a wild card with this. Quite a lot of bakeries in Greece have this habit of doing just everything. So it's drinks plus savouries plus baklava plus bread plus Easter eggs plus coffee plus chocolates plus truffles plus ice creams plus desserts plus. But it was a solid Fredo anyhow, very much feeling that. There were some ancient temples I just wanted to peek at, and also I looped around to get some of the windmills on the southern end of Paricchia. Anyway, it was time for dinner. The sun went down, had a lot of feelings. What about it? It was an incredible show. And yes, in April we got a waterfront table with ease from one of the sort of 10 or 12 restaurants along that stretch by the castle. Like, absolute high point. So, cut to next morning, went crazy and actually allowed myself to sleep until 8. Wild. When I actually did step out, Paricchia was incredibly quiet. It was Orthodox Good Friday, so a lot of small businesses were closed and only a few people were out. And we had a pretty subdued morning of coffee and, well, relaxing, a concept almost as foreign to me as the Cyrillic alphabet. Eventually, our ferry came into view. The disembarkation of everyone from the ferry was absolutely mad. A solid half hour of cars pouring out the ferry. To be completely honest, I have no idea where they were hiding them all. And the police frantically trying to keep the traffic moving. And that was it. Paros disappearing behind us. Well, technically just Paricchia, as we spent the next 90 minutes circumnavigating the island. But if you check the time code, we've still got quite a bit of runtime left. There's a coda to all this. Our next stop is one of the lesser visited islands, and so the ferry to get there went out of its way to stop everywhere else first. So having circled Paros, it stopped at Naxos and even overshot all the way back to Santorini and then back out again before we finally wheeled around and headed back out towards Ios. I had not reckoned with just how tedious the ferry felt this time, even though we'd made virtually the same journey in reverse 48 hours previous, but knowing that as the crow flies, it was comparatively close to Paros, it was frustrating having to unnecessarily take the other 3 sides of the square. By the way, you'll discover it sooner or later. Everyone does. You'll have all these plans for Greece and Greek islands, and you put pins on a map, and then you come to try and figure out the connections. Look, the ferries are not a tube network. In summer, there's maybe a few more, but there may only be just 2 or even 1 a day to the lesser visited islands. They are not cheap, as they have little competition. Prices often sit at around £50 a ticket. In a multi-island itinerary, you will be forced to bend your trip around the ferries because they are not in the mood to do you any favours. Just build that into your thinking to try and mitigate the disappointment. So, another unbelievable racket later, and we were disembarking. Even though they had been booked in advance, we quickly sorted the tickets for our escape first, as this had been something of a risk factor had this ticket place been closed for whatever reason. I won't go into the complication of ticket check-ins now, too much admin, just bear in mind that's also a mild jeopardy. Anyway, EOS. Every time I type EOS into this device, it keeps on obligingly changing the OS to uppercase, assuming that I mean the iOS Apple operating system. We had a few hours, so headed inland a short way on foot. Past this tiniest of tiny churches, down a couple of winding paths, and our objective was this, a Cycladic culture ruin perched within these terraces. We already knew going in there was no option where the ferry would have got us there on time to get inside the archaeological site, but even just glimpses of this significant Cycladic site. These are incredibly ancient. I think I might unpack more about the Cycladic cultures in the Naxos episode. Anyway, exciting stuff. Then following the winding footpath, we started getting altitude towards Kora, or I think it's supposed to be said Hora, whichever. The main town on Ios is split between a few buildings at the port and then the town of Kora, which is a ways higher up. It was pretty hot ascending the path, even though the incline was comparatively gentle. Kora was a return to the tight, white streets, and with a little guesswork, we found ourselves at the windmills, which are providing a before and after for the restoration process. But, beautiful views. We didn't end up scaling to the very peak due to time and heat. It was a lovely place, incredibly quiet, but for the doleful bells ringing out on Orthodox Good Friday. Worked our way down from Kora, enjoying the views. Finally sat down at the port to wait for the ferry. Had a very calming espresso, and even better, the place made their own Racco Mello and served it to us hot, to our surprise. The boat was late, so we spent a while just staring at the edge of the harbour waiting for it to appear, but of course it eventually did, a casual 45 minutes late. I had actually been pleasantly surprised in all the chaos how the Blue Star ferries had barely skipped their departure time by more than 10 minutes, and even this they somehow made up in the crossing. And that was it. The delay from Zante ferries bringing our total time on EOS just up to 3 hours. Look, hardly an exhaustive look, I know, but for a place many people have not the first clue about, a nice glimpse. EOS is very lovely. To about the same magnitude Paros had been a step down from the intensity of all the stuff on Santorini, EOS was a pretty big step down again from Paros. In Paros, you could see where the crowds would form at the height of tourist season. Here, you struggle to envisage crowds forming at all. And clearly that's not a negative. To a lot of people that would be a major incentive. But a week here would need to involve some industrial strength relaxing, as there's little in terms of objectives to occupy you. That said, more than enough to vibe with. It's the same with a lot of the less populated Greek islands. I would not be compelling anyone to drop everything and get there at all costs, but it's also delightful and peaceful, and in isolation, it's definitely a nice place to be. It's just unfortunate that Greek islands invite comparison because there are few people for whom time and money is no object. And circling one step back, I mean, how could I say anything bad about Paros? Basically sublime from start to finish. I guess if you were hoping for a messy weekender, you'd be disappointed. We didn't exactly go on a clubbing rampage, but come on, I'm having to make up dumb reasons now. While we loved Perikia, the streets were gorgeous, crammed with cool little independent jewellers and clothing stores. Now, sir, that was an absolute heart stealer. Frankly, ridiculously, unrealistically nice. Something Paros had which Santorini seemingly did not: cats. Loads of stray cats, all very friendly, brilliant. Let's be friends. I hope this doesn't sound like a dereliction of duty, but I don't have any anti-Paros for you. Sorry, we had only one full day and one morning in Paros. Sourcing an anti-Paros boat would have cut across trying to see the greatest hits on Paros itself. Maybe this is just a translation thing, but a lot of attempts to describe everything as an experience. A burger experience, coffee experience, both of these being the experience of purchasing a burger or coffee, and then the experience of experiencing an experience, which I made up because of the compulsive liar that I am. All I will say, there's early signs that Paros may be slowly morphing to more closely resemble Mykonos. Soon we'll have an episode on Mykonos. I'm not here to give you an economics lesson, but nature abhors a vacuum, and if businesses can charge €25 and up just one island over, I mean, sure, other Cycladic islands may not have the footfall to allow for that, and historic price levels mean the prices can only rise gradually. But if someone one island over is charging 3 times what you are for essentially the same items, you're going to be looking at your menu, glancing down the street at everyone else's, and maybe just adding on a couple of euros next season, and so on and so on. It's pretty easy to understand, really. While it's a slow process, the price differential between islands will be looking to equalise over time, and that means the more prominent places, prices are going to creep. Anyway, I have nothing unpleasant whatsoever to say about Paros, but when people moot it as the next big success story of the Cyclades, or the inevitable opaque headlines from legacy media trying to tease you with, "Ooh, the secret Greek island that locals don't want you," you know, just temper expectations. Anyway, happy to say that we are not done. We've got a story to finish on Santorini, as we are going to explore Ia and the northern portion of the island, so check back for that. The music you've been hearing in the background of these episodes is ours. We create all the music for these episodes, and you can find it on bandcamp.com. If you want to support the channel, that's the place to do it. Otherwise, definitely check out the Greek playlist for lots more. We'll be adding the Cyclades episodes as we go, but there's loads more from mainland Greece and also the Ionian Islands in the west. Otherwise, follow us on the socials, and we'll catch you very soon.